And we need to go to the next keynote speaker. And that is Assistant Professor Anna Törnroos-Remes, Department of Biosciences at Åbo Academy University. And she will give a presentation of the future aspects of the Baltic Sea. So very welcome, Anna. Are you ready?
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect.
Can see you and can hear you. And then you could try to share your screen.
Yes, I will try to share it. Thanks so much for inviting me. And thank you also, Lena, for the really good start to this. Let's see if we can get it up. There we go. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Perfect. I will do like this as well, and maybe you can see my. No? Okay. Anyway, yes, thanks for inviting me, and this is really exciting, and congratulations to the 30 years as well for the Baltic University program. Really nice to hear also some of the anecdotes of what's been going on and how it started. Some future prospects then. Lena neatly touched upon them as well, and I will sort of continue on, and maybe we can look into some of the questions that also came up already. I wanted to start with this picture of the Baltic Sea here. Largely or mainly, I would say, maybe because this is I think it's a really neat picture of our beautiful sea. It also shows some small details that we not always are aware of. The color of the sea, for example, the coastal areas, the deeper parts, the small intricate water, or actually a lot of lakes that sort of link to the runoff and the problems also that we have in the Baltic Sea. I also wanted to highlight the link to one of the really important areas in the future and where we see a lot of changes, and that is the Arctic. The Baltic Sea is not a single sea somewhere enclosed as such. It also links, as Lena talked about, but it links to an Arctic region where we see huge and very fast changes happening. And this will, of course, also influence the Baltic Sea due to the climate change, for example. Then if I continue, and coming down to the sea level where we usually look at the sea and how we enter and interact with the sea. The sea is something that we use quite often, and we need it for our well-being and our existence. And as you can see here, some of the statistics about how we use the sea. We of course use it as recreational ways and activities. We ship things on the sea. We ourselves move around in the sea, and we get food from the sea through the fisheries business, of course. And as you can see, these are not activities that are not an importance for the economy as well. This is some statistics about how much value these activities and benefits from the sea costs and give us, not just for the Baltic Sea region, but also for the European region. Then moving down to the sea level and actually going under the sea surface, which is where the marine environment, the ecosystem, the animals live. And I want to highlight with this picture that we are still exploring this. We've learned a lot, as Lena said. We have a lot more information now than we had before, but we are still exploring it. And I wanted to give you an example of this with a sound that we recorded with our research last year at the Åland Islands. And this is a new sound and new knowledge for the Baltic Sea region, but also globally. We are trying to map the soundscape of the Baltic Sea seafloor in order to understand what the organisms are really doing there. So here goes. So I think this is a fantastic sound, and it really shows that we have so much to learn still about the sea floor and the sea in general. We don't really know what it is, but as such, but we are quite certain that it should be the insects in the Baltic Sea that are communicating with each other. And insects are an interesting and very important part of the fauna in the Baltic Sea. So there are ways of how we can increase our knowledge about the sea, and this is important for the future in order to be able to solve some of these challenges. And I promised to give an outlook for what the future holds. And just as Lena talked about the challenges in the past, I will also highlight some of the challenges for the future. And one of them is, of course, our old problem, you could say, in the Baltic Sea, eutrophication. We've improved on it a lot. There are still a lot we should do and can do to improve the situation. We've done a lot for improving the point sources, as Lena neatly took up, but now it's about the diffuse sources, and especially in the coastal areas where we need to stop the influx of nutrients into the Baltic Sea. So this is a huge challenge still today. Another one is the fact that biodiversity is declining globally, but also in the Baltic Sea. And we need to manage this, because this is really for us, for our existence and for our well-being. At the moment, we are in what we call globally as the 6th mass extinction. So the rates of species are decreasing very rapidly. We are destroying the environments for these species to live in. And for the Baltic Sea, this is also an acute problem in many ways, because it's a unique sea and it's, as we know already, historically stressed. Another one is, of course, climate change as a challenge also to the Baltic Sea. Here you see a video of what's been happening since the 1800s up until today. And the Baltic Sea is an area in the world that is warming the fastest. Generally in the world, 2020 proved again to be one of the warmest years ever recorded. So this is not anything that we can look away from in the Baltic Sea either. Climate change is more than just the increase in temperature. The IPCC outlines these points, the fact that the water will become, of course, warmer. We will also experience more heat waves in the water. These are sort of short-term increases in temperature. Higher seas, the sea level will rise, of course, but it will also get more acidic. And this is something that we still need to work on getting the knowledge about this, what this is causing in the Baltic Sea. It will get less oxygen rich in general and less productive and predictable. For the Baltic Sea, what will that then mean? All of the above, but also the fact that we will have increased rain, increased rainfall, especially in the northern parts, which will mean that we will have increased runoff and less saline sea. This will also mean that we will have even more nutrients coming into the sea. We will get less ice and much more varying ice conditions in the Baltic Sea, and climate change will also affect the wave and wind conditions, which will affect the circulation, for example, in the Baltic Sea. What will this mean for marine life then? Well, as Elena already took up here, it means first and foremost who can live where, what kind of species can live where, and this will affect how we also experience and what we can do with the sea. As Lena pointed out, blue mussel and the bladder wrack, the algae, will probably move in the future much more south, as will one of the keystone species as well, the seagrass, that will also probably be pushed much further south in the Baltic Sea. This is sort of the distributional changes that we can think will happen in the future, but also what we need to look much more into is how the tolerances of the species, especially in relationship to the heat waves. these shorter and sometimes also longer over a couple of weeks increases in temperature, especially in the shallower coastal areas. And this can mean a lot for our really keystone species in Baltic Sea. And then this again will mean that we will have probably changes in the food web of the Baltic Sea. Now, this is a simplified illustration of the food web structure in the Baltic Sea. However, I want to point out that this is much more how it looks like when we dig into it scientifically. There's much more linkages, and they are intricate and they're quite complex, although we have a seemingly simple food web in the Baltic Sea. The changes in the food web again will mean that we have changes in the maritime life, and it will, for example, affect the fisheries and what type of species we have there. This is a figure showing the landings of different fishes in the Baltic Sea, and it's very little, I know that, but I wanted to show that around the between 1980s and 1990s, we had a shift where the cod really gone down because of the changes in the environment, and so for sprat and herring, the landings increased or stayed the same. And today we have a fisheries that is basically focusing on the sprat and herring, the pelagic fish species, rather than the species living near the seafloor. Why are then these changes so complex, and what can we really do about it? Well, we can't, as Lena also pointed out, we can't look at them just one by one, but they can be defined as something that is called the wicked problems. Our human activities are affecting the marine environments, which again affects our moves and how we use the sea. And this is sort of a circle as such. A wicked problem can be defined as a symptom of another problem. It also has characteristics such as uniqueness. All of these problems are unique in themselves. They cross over all kinds of spatial and temporal scales, and also sectors and disciplines. So we need to work together in order to understand these problems. The solutions to these problems are not true or false, but rather good or worse. And it's not just these characteristics that define it, but there's quite some other ones that we need to understand for all of these different types of problems. We need to look into them in much detail in order to try to find some solutions for them. And then that leads me on to the solutions, because I think there are many and they're good, and we are on the right track to do it, and we have a good knowledge about how to solve some of them, or at least to solve them for the moment and then try to re-solve them again as things change. For example, the pollution, that's a good example of something where we did a good job back in time. So what are the real deal breakers? Well, I would argue that, and many with me, is that the eutrophication, we still need to work a lot on that. We need to stop the nutrients coming into the Baltic Sea, flowing into the Baltic Sea, also from the diffuse parts, which is mostly on land and mostly linked, unfortunately, to agriculture and forestry. Climate change and biodiversity loss, we also need to work on that a lot, and we can do it by mitigating these two challenges by conserving and managing life in the sea. We can get better at that. And then generally, I would argue that we should increase knowledge of coastal areas and linkages between the stressors. That's also something that we don't know little about. And apply sustainable thinking in society and business, and also for us in the scientific disciplines. So just some quick notes on how we can work with these solutions. Rethinking agriculture is probably a good thing, and that's already something that we're doing, and we should speed it up. We should stop the input of the nutrients to the sea. There's different ways we can do it. Stop the different diffusive and locate the different diffusive sources still, but we can also look into how we use nutrients and fertilizers. Can we reuse them in some way here? Can we get better at how we distribute the way we use the land, so that not everything will come out in that certain river that will bring it much faster and into the sea. Regarding the solutions to climate change, this is something that we all know that we are working on globally as well. I wanted to highlight that this is the current baseline where we're going. This is where we need to get down to a warming of only 2 degrees or the 1.5. And this, as you can see, is a big gap here between where we are and where we're going to go. So we need to reduce the emissions, and the sea can actually, or the ocean can help us doing that, and that's the blue part here. And what are those actions that we can take that is linked to the oceans and the sea? And they are outlined here. We can look at ocean-based renewable energy, wind parks and so on. But we can also work with the ocean-based transport, so shipping, to reduce the emissions from shipping. We can look at the coastal and marine ecosystems. They are also important in storing carbon and so on. Fisheries, and then also, the carbon storage in the seabed. And these might seem small, but they are really important also for the bigger picture here. So there are ways that we can work with these on a larger scale as well. For biodiversity and climate change, there are also other practical ways that we can mitigate these changes. We can conserve, manage, and restore, and especially through the spatial planning that has also improved a lot during the recent years. This is the Finnish or Finland's Maritime Spatial Plan for 2030. We need to look into not just the areas to protect, but also the multitude of ways that we use the sea to mitigate where these actions should be and what we should take and trade off them against each other. We need to increase the protection of the Baltic Sea. What you see here are blue areas, the marine protected areas in the Baltic Sea, and the red ones here are suggestions from the scientific knowledge where we should place and how we should extend the marine protected areas. And this is not anything that is just said within the Baltic Sea. These are goals on a global scale from the UN and from the European Union as well to increase the protected areas. Regarding restoration, Lena already took up this question, and there are many different ways that we can look into restoration of smaller bays, inlets, and so on, but also environments such as, for example, the seagrasses, which can bind and cycle carbon very effectively. How should we then do this? Well, the future calls for this, or the calls that are already there, is to increase the inter and transdisciplinary collaborations. This is in order for us to understand these wicked problems. They also are expanding many different sectors and so on. So we need to do that. And we can do that together, co-creatively and in a dialogue. And we need to understand that we need to speed this up in order to be able to solve these and find solutions for these wicked problems. Local knowledge is also important to take in, and by that I, for example, mean the knowledge by people living out in the archipelago areas, the fishermen, their knowledge about how the sea is changing and how we should manage, for example, climate change. They have a lot of important knowledge that are not always taken into considerations when we're doing the big adjustments and looking at the policies. This is are thinking at Åbo Academy University at the moment within the research profile, the Sea, where we are sort of working with a concept that is called the living lab. So including many different disciplines, a lot of these different collaborators that we need in order to solve these wicked problems, NGOs, policymakers, not just the research institutions, but also the governmental and the third sector, definitely. The maritime industry has a big role to play here as well. And by that, I want to thank you for listening in. And this has already been a really nice series, and I'm looking forward to the future as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Anna, for your very interesting presentation, both highlighting future challenges and solutions. And I'm really happy to see that there are some going on positive actions out there. So we have some questions, one from Gun Rudqvist. Anna, from your point of view, what would you like the policymakers to do tomorrow, implement directly addressing eutrophication?
Yes, I think what I would like them to do, and what we are also here in Finland been talking about, is daring to take up this discussion about how we manage the land and agriculture in a much more wider perspective. What kind of soils do we have? Where can we do this type of trade-off and shifting of how we use the land for cattle or for farm for growing crops and so on, increasing the area around rivers and key rivers that are bringing the nutrients to the sea. Having a much more vivid discussion on this is something that I would like to see.
Thank you. We also have a question from Ludmila Savoyska. Could pipelines impact the Baltic Sea in some way? And if so, how?
Yeah, we have a couple of, or not just a couple, we have quite a lot of pipelines in the Baltic Sea. And there's a quite thick grid of them. They can definitely, both in, I would say, a good and a bad way, depending on which area you're looking at and where it goes. Pipelines can be negative or have a negative impact, of course, because they take up space that, and maybe also, I mean, maybe, or when they are laid down, this can destroy the seafloor and communities there. Over time, I see them as also not necessarily positive, but they can also create living space for organisms there. I would say that the big problem is probably in the coastal areas, deep down in when the pipelines go into the deeper parts of the Baltic Sea. Unfortunately, we have that hypoxic area in there. So I think for the biology, it doesn't necessarily make such a big difference. But in the coastal areas, they need thinking about and planning.
Thanks. And then we have one from Kaliningrad, Pavel Kovalichin. How do you assess the danger of bioinvasion or global falling?
On biofouling, or? Yeah.
How do you assess the danger of bioinvasion or global falling?
Okay. Yeah, I'm not an expert on that, but there've been, depending on what kind of organisms you have, of course, it depends on what kind of impact it can do for us, the activities that we humans are concerned with. In terms of the effects on food web and so on, Lena mentioned that, and those are things we we need to take into consideration, and it can actually change change the chains in the Baltic Sea quite a lot. But they can also be positive, as we could see that the goby or the Harris mud crab that's come in can have positive effect as well in terms of a new food source for fish or high trophic levels.
Yes, thank you. Then we have a question from Shepard Urania. Sustainability thinking. What is the situation in the Baltic states regarding sustainability thinking? Is there uniformity in what, how, and when we action points?
Probably my quick answer is probably not. My longer answer would be that the different countries have to work on these points also through not just the, for example, HELCOM or the activities we want to work with regarding the Baltic Sea, but also from the EU and from the global goals that are put on the countries. So there are plans worked out for these. However, I think that there are many aspect that should be better improved as well about sharing good knowledge and good ways of doing this. Regarding the marine area and the Baltic Sea as such, I think the circular economy and the circular thinking in terms of waste treatment, and especially with the plastic problem and the litter problem, there is sort of this has gone very fast, and I think that's really positive signs as well, that we can adapt our human, because it's only we humans can change how we affect the sea and thereby help the sea. So these fast changes through the thinking of circular economy with the litter problem is a good sign, I think.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna, and Lena as well, and also the colleagues that have contributed with interesting questions. And before I will